Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into an absolutely epic story, how centuries of brutal conflict, invasion, and rebellion actually hammered out the political identity of modern Britain.
You know, you should think of Britain's history less like a straight line and more like a chaotic relay race for power. The baton of rule was almost never passed smoothly. It was pretty much always stolen. We're going to see it go from Neolithic builders to Roman engineers, from Anglo-Saxon kings to Viking warriors, then to Norman conquerors, and finally to Parliament itself.
So, the really big question we're tackling today is this. How on earth did this relentless, centuries-long struggle for control transform Britain from a simple battleground for invaders into the actual birthplace of parliamentary monarchy?
Right, so our story really begins with a land defined by wave after wave of invasion. Each group shows up, conquers what they can, and leaves this permanent mark on the culture, the language, and of course the politics of the island.
First up, the Romans. They land in 43 AD and set up this really sophisticated Romano-British culture across the southern half of Britain. These guys were master builders, leaving behind roads and towns, but they never quite managed to conquer the north. They built Hadrian's Wall just to keep the Scottish tribes out. So when Rome finally pulls out in 409 AD, it leaves behind this huge power vacuum and an island that's completely vulnerable to the next wave.
And who poured into that vacuum? The Anglo-Saxons. Now, these Germanic tribes didn't just conquer, they totally remade the island. They pushed the native Celts out to the fringes, to what we now call Wales and Scotland. They laid the very foundations of England, creating kingdoms, the English language, and even local administrative units called shires, a system so effective it's actually survived for over 1,000 years.
But of course, that peace was never going to last. In the 9th century, a new terror arrives from the sea, the Vikings. At first, they just raid rich monasteries, but that evolves into full-blown settlement. They became so dominant that they established their own territory in the north, governed by their own laws, the Danelaw. By 875, only one Saxon kingdom, Wessex, led by Alfred the Great, was left standing against a total Viking conquest.
So for centuries, the story was one of slow change and shifting borders. But then came a single year, one battle that didn't just shift the balance of power, it completely shattered the old world. This is the moment right here that changes everything.
The year is 1066. William, the incredibly ambitious Duke of Normandy, crosses the English Channel, defeats and kills the English king, Harold Godwinson, at the Battle of Hastings, and crowns himself William the Conqueror. Just like that, the Anglo-Saxon era is over.
But William's genius wasn't just in winning the battle, it was in control. He brings over this system called feudalism, and the concept was brutally simple. The king owns everything. And to lock down his power, he surgically removes the entire English ruling class, replacing 4,000 Saxon landlords with just 200 of his most loyal Norman barons. In one single move, he made loyalty the currency of the entire kingdom. This creates this incredibly rigid social pyramid. Power flows directly from the top. The king gives land to his barons, who in turn give it to knights for military service, and who's holding the whole thing up? The serfs. They have no land and no rights, and they work for everybody else. It was a perfect system for ensuring one thing: total royal control.
Okay, so this new system created immense power for the king, but it also planted the seeds of a brand new kind of conflict. What happens when the king's most powerful subjects, the very nobles he created, decide he's gone way too far?
By 1215, King John had somehow managed to alienate almost everyone. He lost the nobles' ancestral lands over in Normandy, he got into a huge fight with the Pope, and he just kept demanding more and more tax money. The nobles felt that the king had completely broken his end of the feudal deal, protection in exchange for loyalty, so they united. And for the first time, they acted not as individuals, but as a single class, marching on London to demand their rights.
They cornered him at Runnymede and forced him to sign a revolutionary document, the Magna Carta. For the very first time, an English king was forced to agree, in writing, that he was not above the law. One of its most powerful clauses promised all free men the right to a fair trial. I mean, what a radical idea in an age of absolute power.
So the 14th and 15th centuries, they brought a period of just profound crisis. War, disease, civil unrest, it all came together to completely shatter the feudal world, clearing the way for something entirely new. In 1348, the Black Death arrived.
This catastrophic plague wiped out at least a third of the entire population. It was a human tragedy on a scale that's just hard to imagine. But it had this startling economic consequence. With so few workers left, peasants could suddenly demand wages and better conditions, and that fatally weakened the serf-based feudal system.
And as if a massive plague wasn't enough, the English nobility then decided to tear itself apart. After the disastrous 100 Years' War with France, two rival branches of the royal family, the House of Lancaster and the House of York, fought a brutal 30-year civil war for the throne. We know it today as the Wars of the Roses.
Out of the ashes of this civil war that basically destroyed the old nobility, a new dynasty emerged, the Tudors, and they were shrewd, ruthless, and absolutely brilliant at consolidating power. They crushed the few nobles that were left and started forging a powerful, centralized nation-state.
The Tudors' ambition, it was boundless. When the Pope refused to grant King Henry VIII the divorce, Henry didn't just find a new wife, he took over the entire church. With the 1534 Act of Supremacy, he completely severed England from Rome, creating a national Church of England with a new single head, the king himself.
And his daughter, Elizabeth I, she cemented this new national power on the world stage. In 1588, her navy famously defeated the Spanish Armada, a massive fleet sent by Europe's greatest superpower to conquer England. That victory secured England's independence and kickstarted its journey to becoming a global trading empire.
But while the monarchs were busy building their own power, another institution had been quietly growing in influence, Parliament. And now, a final, bloody showdown was pretty much inevitable to answer the ultimate question, who truly ruled Britain, the king or the people's representatives?
You see, the Stuart kings, who came after the childless Elizabeth, had a very different idea about what it meant to be a monarch. They believed they were chosen by God and had a divine right to rule, which meant they were accountable to no one on earth. This put them on a direct collision course with a wealthy and increasingly assertive parliament.
The result was the English Civil War. On one side, you had the Cavaliers, loyal to King Charles I in his divine right. On the other, the Roundheads, fighting for the authority of Parliament. The war raged for years and ended with something truly unthinkable. The Roundheads won, and in 1649, Parliament put their own king on trial and executed him.
After decades of turmoil, the struggle finally hit its climax in the Glorious Revolution of 1688. Parliament basically went out and hired a new king and queen, but only after forcing them to agree to a new contract, the Bill of Rights. This document fundamentally changed all the rules. It made it official and permanent. Parliament, not the monarch, would be the supreme power in Britain. And so, from invaders to kings to nobles, and finally to Parliament, that baton of power had completed its long and very bloody journey. The relentless conflicts didn't just change who the rulers were, they created a whole new kind of government, a parliamentary monarchy that would go on to shape not just Britain, but the entire modern world. Which leaves just one question: who challenges for power next?